This tutorial will teach you how to create a turkey stitch. A turkey stitch is like a fluffy stitch where you've got a pile of thread. Looks kind of like grass to me. And I'm going to be showing you how to do this today. So the first thing you're going to do is you want your thread. I like to use 6 strands of thread for this stitch. Depending on what you're doing, you could change that, but the more strands you use, the fluffier it will look. So you're going to start by inserting your needle from the top side. So I'm going to put my needle in my fabric and I'm going to pull through. With this stitch, you actually do not want a knot at the end of your thread. So you're going to pull all 6 strands through and you're going to leave your tail out on front. And notice there's no knot. You don't need one. Okay, you're going to bring your needle up now from underneath to the left of your stitch, to the left of your tail. So just coming right up to the left of it. And you're going to pull it through. You can kind of keep your thumb on the tail so that it doesn't get pulled through as well. So it kind of holds it in place. And then you're going to stitch down to the right side of that tail. This little stitch we're doing is locking that tail into place. I like to call it a locking stitch. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to take your needle and you're going to bring it up through the same hole that your tail was in. So that should be right in the middle of your locking stitch, right where the tail went through. You're going to bring your needle up and you're going to stitch over to the right. You want to keep the stitches super close together. That's what will make this look fuller. So I'm going to do a little tiny stitch to the right of the tail. And I'm going to pull it, but I'm not going to pull it all the way through. I'm going to let a loop form. Okay, so I've got my loop and I'm going to hold it down with my thumb so that I don't lose that loop. I'm going to now do another locking stitch. So I'm going to bring the needle up to the left of that loop, which is right where my other locking stitch ended. And I'm going to pull it through. I'm holding down this loop with my thumb so it doesn't come out. And then I'm going to lock that stitch down by stitching to the right of the loop and pulling it through. So now I've locked that into place. So now I'm going to do another loop. I'm going to bring my needle up through the same hole as that loop that I just created. I'm going to pull it through and I'm going to stitch over to the right. I'm doing a small stitch so that it will look fluffy, so that my turkey stitch will look fluffier and full. And I'm going to let a loop form, so I'm not pulling it all the way through. Okay, creating that loop. I'm trying to keep my loops about the same size, but it doesn't really matter because we're going to trim it at the end. Then I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to create another locking stitch. So I'm going to go to right to where the last locking stitch ended, and I'm going to insert my needle up. And then I'm going to go down to the right of that stitch. So I'm doing a little stitch over the loop and locking it into place. And I'm going to keep doing this. So again, I'm going to create another loop by going up through the same hole. And then stitching over to the right a teeny bit. Letting a loop form. Okay. And then I'm going to do a locking stitch. Going right where my last locking stitch ended. And I'm just stitching over that loop. So I'm doing a little stitch over that loop. I'm just using my thumb to hold everything in place until it's locked into place with that locking stitch. And I'm going to keep going. You can use this stitch for when you want, an area of your embroidery to look fluffy. You can actually do like several rows of this, and by doing several rows, you can fill in a large area. I'm just doing one row today, but you could do a row below this and keep going down until you've filled in an entire area that you want to fill in. So I'm going back up through where my last loop was made, stitching over a little bit, letting a loop form. Doesn't have to be exactly the same size as all the other loops, but try to make them somewhat the same. And then making my little locking stitch by starting on the left of my loop and stitching over to the right. And I'll do a few more. Okay, got my loop. I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller. There we go. I'm gonna start to the left of my loop, stitch up, and then go over to the right and lock it into place. Okay, and let's do one more. So bring my needle up, create a loop. Don't pull it all the way through. And then once I've got my loop, I'm gonna lock it into place by going up through to the left of my loop and stitching over to the right. Okay, so I've got my row that I wanted. I'm now going to tie it off on the back so that I don't lose any of my stitches. I like to do a knot by going underneath one of my previous stitches and then going back through the loop. I do that twice and that makes a nice knot. Okay, so then I can trim this off. I'm done with my needle and thread, well, for now. If you wanted to do like a whole area of this stitch, you could do another row right below it. And you could do as many rows as you wanted, but for this purpose of the tutorial, I'm just doing one row today. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take our scissors and we're gonna give it a little haircut. So remember that once you cut, the thread is gone, so don't cut too much. It's better to take off a little at a time. I'm gonna try to make mine match this turkey stitch up here, so I'm gonna try to cut it about the same length. So just kind of pull all these loops up, and then you're gonna just take your scissors and trim. Okay. And then you can kind of fluff it around with your finger. You can even use your needle if you'd like to separate the strands of thread. Kind of just fluff them out, pull apart the different strands. And then if you think you need to cut it again, you can. You can shape it however you want. Just remember not to take off too much. If you end up with little fuzzies all over your fabric and you're having a hard time getting those off with your finger, a little trick is you can take a piece of tape, which I've got right here to the side, and you can just go like this over your fabric and that will pull off the fuzzies. Okay, and so now I've got my turkey stitch. And that's how you do it.